What's up, mamas? Thanks so much for being here with us today. We have Sami Cohn. She is a blogger, host of the Sami Cohn Show, and author of the book Raising Uncommon Kids. She has 2 children and lives in Nashville. She does a lot more than that too. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Sami, thank you so much for coming on here with me.
Oh, it's so good to see you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. We're gonna be talking about raising uncommon kids and more compassionate kids. So What inspired you to write the book Raising Uncommon Kids?
I wanted to kill my daughter. Is that fair? No, honestly, it was one of those moments. I think we've all had one, if not multiple. She was about 7 at the time. And it was just one of those, I hope I'm not putting anyone off. I wanted to wring her neck. Obviously, I would never do that. But it was one of those nights where everything I said, she didn't want to eat her food. And I did the things that we all say we're not going to say. We had our compassion kids on the fridge. And I'm like, well, Gabrielle doesn't get to eat every night, so you should be thankful for what you have. And, she wasn't doing her homework. And I said, well, Gabrielle doesn't even get to go to school. And it was just all the all the things you say you're never going to say as a mom. And we went up, I went to tuck her in, and there was something else. I was like, I wanted to shake her. I'm just like, you are so blessed. Why are you not being more kind, or why do you not care more about, this child halfway around the world at 7, it was all of these moments. Right. And I literally had to walk out of her bedroom, and I fell to the floor. I literally fell to my knees, and I was like, God, you have got to help me. I don't know what to do with this child. And really, she was just being normal, right? She wasn't anything crazy, but he planted this fable in my head that I just have to believe. I don't feel like I hear from God regularly, but it was just this fable that basically starred her, which is always good tip to get into your kids' hearts and minds, is to tell them a story that kind of focuses on themselves as the main character. But the gist of it was that Gabrielle didn't have any pajamas. And my kids feel like superheroes in their pajamas, especially when they were younger. It was the first thing they do when they came home from school. Now, even where we're, how we're living in our loungewear and everything, they'd be passed down from cousins. They love their pajamas. So when I said that to Karis, when I kind of told her this, I said, I just want to tell you a story. And when I mentioned the part about Gabrielle not having pajamas, she sat up in her bed, was like, Mom, we have to do something. We have to fly to Brazil. How can she not have pajamas? She just freaked out. And I'm thinking, it didn't bother you that I told you she didn't have food every night. Didn't bother you that she didn't get to go to school. Didn't bother you that she didn't live with her parents and her parents had abandoned her. Her grandparents were raising her. But when I mentioned she didn't have pajamas, you were like, worldwide, help search party. Let's help this girl. And this thing clicked inside of me of what makes my heart bleed and what touches my heart is not going to be the same for my kids. And so here I was trying to hammer these things into them by speaking about what was important to me, not even stopping to listen to what was it that would be important to my kids. And more importantly, how could I get them to care about the things close to them before I could ever help or expect them to care about the greater issues in the world, right? So that was really the genesis of this. We need to start at home. And the book is divided into 3 categories. Your heart at home, and then it gets up to, your service towards others and compassion for the world.
So then did you just start asking your kids a bunch of questions and listening to them? And how did you start writing that book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I sat on it for a while. It started out as a children's book, honestly. It started as a children's book. I even actually brought it to her 2nd grade teacher at the time and said, and again, this is not, I write, I've been blogging for over a decade, but I don't dabble in children's literature. It was just a totally surreal thing. But I shared it with her. We called it the Pajama Missionary. They did it as a little thing in school. And so I kept developing it to where it wouldn't go away. And I think that's, as moms, as women, when there's something that just stays with you and doesn't go away, you have to pay attention to that. You have to give weight to that. And so I reached out to a friend that worked with a large book publisher here in Nashville at the time, and she did marketing. And I just said, will you read this and see if it has any weight to it? And so long story short, again, I was persistent. She introduced me to an agent. They signed me thinking we were going to put this out as a children's book. And about 3 months in, he said, Sami, we love the heart behind it. We love, all of it. But he said, I really think you need to write this as a book for moms. This came out of your heart cry as a mom to help your kids be more compassionate, more understanding, go against the grain. So you should do that. I was like, yep, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Definitely. And then I freaked myself out. And I did nothing because I'm thinking at the time, my kids were not even in junior high. I'm like, who am I to write a parenting book? And about every 3 months, he would call me and say, no rush, but, any movement? I'm like, nope. And then finally, about 9 months in, I had this, again, just an epiphany, I'll say from the Lord, that it was to be based on the characteristics of Colossians 3:12 through 14. And it's, all of these great, compassion, kindness, humility, patience, gentleness, above all else, put on love. It was all of these characteristics. And that's when it kind of dawned on me of that. I almost say it's like an AA. It's like a 12-step book, but for helping your kids be kind and compassionate, because it starts with, like I said, just learning what love is, right? How do we learn from love? Well, love is from God, loving ourselves, loving the people within our four walls, right? So how do we respect our parents? How do we be kind to siblings? How do we help, get wisdom from our grandparents? And then it goes outside to our community. And how do we learn from our school systems, from our neighbors, from that sort of thing? And then it kind of builds out to city, state, country, and the world. So it really was this, when it finally clicked, it made it so much easier for me to write and to also lean on. I've got what I call mentor mom moments in the book. So in every chapter, I reached out to someone that was really impactful in different areas of my parenting, whether it was knowing whether to homeschool, private school, public school, all of those things, those decisions, from Barbara Rainey, who is the co-founder of Family Life. I have, great moments from just, everything from, my own mom to other really strong women leaders that were able to speak into those areas of, memorizing chapters of the Bible or things of that nature, but really just being practical about loving others well.
I love that so much. You talk about compassionate kids too, raising compassionate kids. What is the tie between uncommon kids and passionate kids?
Yeah. So I think, like I said, to have compassion for someone else really necessitates some level of understanding. So I mentioned in the beginning about Gabrielle, that we, adopted through Compassion International, that we sponsored. And even with that, because there really is no way to get a small child, I think, some have a really unique heart, but to get a small child to understand what it's like to go to bed hungry, or to understand what it's like to, live in a 1-bedroom tent or shack with, 12 family members. And so the way that we did that was that I went to that organization, said, I want to find children to sponsor that have the exact same ages as my kids. Exact same birthday, not even the exact same age, exact same birthday. So they may not, and we had Ayush in India, and we had Gabrielle in Brazil. So even though they may had never been to those countries and they were halfway around the world, what 7-year-olds like, what this 5-year-old is going through, what their dreams are, what they like to, whether it's just a matter of at this age, they like to play soccer versus at this age, they like to play, something else or talk about something else. That alone really helped, align our kids and teach them about some things. So it started just by finding, like we were talking before, finding out what makes their heart tick, what is of interest to them. Just like you could have 6 kids and every single one of them could be completely different. You could have an artist, an athlete, a reader, a non-reader. Even with 2 kids, I find they're totally different. And so I could say something to my daughter and have it like totally go over her head. Whereas I say it to my son and he's like, take all the money in my piggy bank, do, whatever it is. So that's where you really have to start, because building compassion starts with understanding. And I think, whether you're a woman of faith or not, I grew up Jewish, I'm a Christian now. I really admire all of the different faiths of the world. I feel like have this element of compassion. And where I think things get muddy is where people try to convince someone about their religious beliefs instead of trying to form a relationship with them, because people aren't going to care what you have to say until they know you care about them. And our kids operate very much in the same way. I could talk to them all day, but if they didn't see me modeling what I believed, then it doesn't matter, because I always say, lessons are caught and not taught. I talk about that in the book. If I'm doing one thing over and over and saying something else, they're going to watch what I do before what I say. And so even finding different activities for them to participate in was really important from a young age. We found a soup kitchen that we could participate in with Hands on Nashville. And, you know, there's a lot of liabilities to bring small children with you to different places. But it was at a church. It was just a really small, small 1-room soup kitchen once a week. And they had a nursery it was just a room. There was no one manning it, but our kids could kind of play in the nursery room that was right next to the kitchen while we were cooking. And then when it was time to eat, they would sit and eat with us. And then it was time to clean up. They could take a sponge and clean up. So they were seeing people that looked different from them. They might not have understood that they were homeless, but they were getting to eat and sit next to someone that was not someone they would normally see. And even in that, just like if you were to travel to another country, even on vacation, right? There's different smells, there's different sights, there's different architecture. The more that you can immerse yourselves and let them know what you see in front of you is not the whole world, that starts to open the conversation.
I think that's so important. And you mentioned that it starts with the parents.
Yeah.
So what as a parent should we be focusing on in order to kind of teach all that to our kids?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? Because, there's someone that's thinking like, I'm doing so much already. I can't do one more thing. I can't take on my kids' compassion upon myself. But really, that's the freedom of it. Is I think sometimes as moms, I'll venture out to say we push our own needs aside and we push our dreams down, and we think we're doing it for the right reasons, right? We say we're doing this for our kids and we're doing this for our family. But the more that we put aside, again, what drives us, what kind of burns inside of us, we're setting an example for our kids that I would say is unhealthy, because they're not learning right relationship with themselves. They're not learning right relationship with others, right? We become, I would, again, dare say, codependent on our kids. And so as a parent, we need to be a mirror and kind of reflect what we expect from them. And even, at a higher standard, they'll rise to the occasion. I mean, I used to be a tennis pro, and I always preferred playing people that were better than me, because I would, if nothing else, and just for my pride, I feel like I've got to step up to that. And I think our kids are very much the same way, that they want to rise to the occasion, not only to make us proud, but to really stand out. And that's what being an uncommon kid is all about. It's really that, how can I stand out without sticking out? Because our kids, and I mean, most of us don't want to be different, in a I'm going to get made fun of, but they want to rise above. And I found that when you can teach your kids to, everyone won't always agree with you, but when you live a consistent life, they will respect you. And so that's, especially in this culture, in this era, as parents, if we're complaining about an election, if we're complaining about how, something else is going wrong, and looking negatively at an opportunity instead of positively, and putting down someone that was trying to help us, but maybe did it in a way that we wouldn't have done it, that's going to become their language, and that's going to become their norm. And so it's really up to us as parents. I say this is less a parenting book as it is a mirror of, if we can embody this as parents and make it our norm, then our kids are going to learn to walk alongside us in those same paths.
So it's basically living the way you want your kids to be living.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're interview is done, right? So simple. Like it really is. And I think, you hear these stories of guys in the NFL who, only played football because their dads never got to play and they wanted them to be proud of them. I don't care how old we are. I always hear stories like that. My daughter's a junior in high school, and she had a friend come over that's a senior, and she was talking to me about these 3 colleges she wants to go to. And she's like, well, I think I'm going to do this and go into this field because my mom does this, my dad does this, and I think they'll be happier. But then she was talking about English and poetry and literature and playing basketball at this amazing school. And I was like, I wish I could, again, I'm like, okay, allow me to be your mirror. Allow me just to reflect back everything I'm hearing and seeing you say. And again, I'm like, I'm not trying to convince you. I just know that deep down, right, we're proud of our kids, whatever they do. Like, there's nothing, I tell my kids, there's nothing you can do that would make me stop loving you or love you any less. I want the best for you. And so if we're living in a way, and this is why it's important as moms that we need to do this and practice this ourselves. If we're living in a way that's for others, in a looking for achievement or looking for acceptance, that's not the living for others we want, right? We want to live for others in a way that, I would say, if God gives us something, it has to flow out of us. Live for others in a way that points others to amazing things. Like, I might not be able to change world hunger or even hunger in Nashville, but I know an amazing organization that helps the homeless, and I'm going to do everything I can for them. And you know what? With our daughter, that looked like being able to, she's great at organizing. So we went and organized their donations. And someone might say, well, that's not stopping homelessness. Well, no, but that's taking something off the list of someone that can stop homelessness,
Yes.
so that it frees them to do what they do better. So it's like, even those little things. We had a huge flood in Nashville 10 years ago, right? Devastating. And I had babies in car seats. And I'm like, I can't tear down plywood and help whatever. But you know what? Our church had 2 different locations and they need supplies shuttled between those 2 locations. I'm like, I've got a minivan and kids in car seats. I can shuttle. So I think instead of putting these really big expectations on our kids of, you need to win a Nobel Prize by the time you're 16 and sail around the world in a, sail ship. You can tell I don't sail.
We know what you mean.
It just needs to, you got it. You got me. It's just, like I said, being able to sometimes drag them along. I'm not above dragging my kids somewhere. It's harder now that they're bigger than me. But I'm not afraid of making them not like me for a little bit, to put them in a situation that I know is going to not only be good for them, but make them think and challenge them. Like, even when my daughter's like, I don't know if I want to be a Christian. I'm like, okay, why? Oh, well, I don't. That's great. Like, make your faith your own, but tell me why. Why do you believe what you believe? Or why do you not believe what you believe? Now go somewhere else. Great. Let's go to a temple. Let's go to a different service. Like, let's meet people. We've got a huge Kurdish population 1 mile this way. We've got a huge Latin population another mile this way. That's why we moved to this part of Nashville, so that she could see people that don't look like her and talk to people that believe differently than her, because that's the only way that you can cement your own foundations and start to care about people other than yourself. So I could talk about this all day.
Oh, I love it. And you're so passionate about it. I love everything you've said so far. You talk about there are 7 keys to raising uncommon kids. Could you briefly go over those with us?
Yeah. So
you may have mentioned right? Some of them.
I have. Yeah. I've got all 12 on my website on samicone.com. There's, I kind of go through 12 days of uncommon kids. And I talk about, kind of where we were before about, love, respect, wisdom, humility, really trying to look at, and not just the thing that, the thing I love about my book, the thing that I talk about in the book, like I said, is that it is that stair step. So, you talk about the heart at home, the attitude towards others. And with each chapter, it not only has one of those characters, but then it talks about where to put that into practice. So what, is it a sibling relationship? Is it a parent-child relationship? Is it a student-teacher relationship? Is it extended family, a community group? So I think when you can kind of boil it down to some of those things, and it goes, love, harmony, gentleness, forgiveness, wisdom, patience, and then, going all the way to compassion. That's where I think we get it wrong a lot of times, is because we just expect our kids to be kind, right? We expect our kids to say at 7 to say, it's okay, I don't need a birthday party this year. Just donate all my presents to finding clean water in Africa, right? Like, we expect that, but we don't help them on that journey to even get to that point. Like, we've lived a lot of years and it's still hard for us to get to that point. I know where they've asked us to like take our shoes off in church and donate them. I'm like, oh, but I just bought these and they're super cute. And, would they really need these in Africa? Like, maybe a better, more practical tennis shoe. I'll bring you back a tennis shoe. Like, I'm going to keep my heels. Like, it's hard for us. And yet somehow we expect our kids just to kind of willingly go along with whatever it is without giving them the why. And knowing that why is going to be different for each child. So that's where, in the book, I try to really make it practical. And I like to say it's an easy read, because I want people to get through the whole book of being able to look at, what can we do now that we know this? What can we do to help our kids get to this place? And whether that's taking a teenager on social media and saying, dedicate 1 day to helping to stop human trafficking. Instead of posting anything else on your stories, just post about slave trade or modern day human trafficking, or, just that's making a difference where you are with what you have. what does that look like for kids? Maybe it is donating pajamas. Maybe it is just saying, let's take some of these, and can we go visit the children's hospital where we are, or can we not? And again, that's harder now because of social distancing and everything that's going on. Maybe it's teaching them how to write a letter once a day for a month, to someone, to a nursing home, someone that's in a nursing home that hasn't left for a year in some cases, right? So it's been interesting for me to observe my kids and find out what makes them tick, so that it really matters. They're not just doing it because mom is doing it. They're doing it because they're able to flex what their heart cry is. They want to be loved, right? We all want to be loved. And part of that reciprocal relationship is to show love in return. We just have to kind of broaden our definition of what it means to show love. And once our kids begin to see that with all those different relationships and learn how people, whether it's love languages, whether it's Enneagram, any of those tools that we can do, that's where the compassion builds and grows and nurtures and hopefully continues to expand even when they don't live under our roof.
That's so awesome. And you mentioned it's better to add good behaviors instead of trying to eliminate bad ones. How so?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but if, someone comes out with a new diet and says, you've got to cut out dairy, alcohol, gluten, sugar, caffeine, I was like, I'm done before I even start. Right. Like
right.
It, especially with some of our kids, any sort of no just bristles them, right? It puts them on the defensive. So instead of focusing on removing bad behaviors, I'd rather push out bad behaviors by adding good ones. So for instance, if we say, you know what, we're going to start writing a letter a week, or we're going to start every Saturday by, going over and helping Mrs. So-and-so with her lawn, or every night, this is what I do with my kids. Even as teenagers, every night before we pray, I asked them to say, what's one good thing that happened today? And trust me, as teenagers in a pandemic, my husband and I just got divorced. I mean, there's a lot that we could complain about and do, but there's always something good. Like there is always something good. And I'll just tell this quick story. Right after the divorce happened, a colleague that I had worked with once said, I want to send you dinner. And normally I would say no. I think as moms too, we have to learn to accept help, right? We have to learn to just reach out, and it's okay it doesn't mean we're weak. It means we're human. And so I said, that would be really great. And she said, you order it. I'll pay for it. And so we were getting something from PF Chang's, and I was trying to still make it small. I'm like, I don't want to overwhelm, take advantage of her generosity, but my son loves this chocolate cake from PF Chang's. And so when I told him Miss Kristen is getting us dinner tonight, he's like, oh, are we getting, chocolate cake? And I said, no, when someone offers to do something for you, you don't say, and I'll take this, right?
Yeah.
So he was excited. Long story short, the order comes, I'm going to cry. And the exact piece of chocolate cake was in the bag that we didn't order. And I don't know if she ordered it. I don't know if the person at PF Chang's put it in. I don't know. All I know is that the exact dessert that my son wanted showed up in the bag that night. So in what was an incredibly difficult time, he felt loved. He felt thought of. He felt special. He didn't feel as alone. And so that's where I feel like, I've learned to hate the question, how are you? Because it can be, if someone's going through something, that's a really hard question to answer. But what I have learned is that joy and suffering can coexist. And if we're waiting for the sorrow and suffering to end before we choose joy, we're going to be waiting a really long time. But if we can stop and say, you know what, today was really hard, and I didn't do well on that test, or I really messed up an interview, or whatever it is, but someone was really kind to me today. Someone went out of their way. Or you know what? We're all together tonight. Everyone else lost power, and we still have power in the midst of this crazy Nashville snow. There's always something that we can redirect. And so that's kind of a long way to come back to why I really believe when you add the good, the bad naturally it doesn't always go away completely. But when you start to see the benefits of the good, you don't want the bad anymore. And even I was in a discussion with my daughter last night. And, she said, every time we get in an argument, it always comes back to you just wanting to be more kind. And I was like, is there a problem with That's it. Like that. For me, it's not about the details. It's not about winning my way. It's about you being kind and respectful and just being able to take someone else's perspective. Because when we can do that, the disagreements are less, right? The things we don't see eye to eye on become less when we can at least say, I don't understand you. I don't understand what you're doing, but I respect you and I love you. So that's where I want to meet you in the middle. And with that kind of mutual respect and love and understanding breeds the compassion, breeds the good behaviors, but not just to be good for good's sake, because we want to embrace that feeling of what happens when we do something outside of ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that's so powerful. And unfortunately, none of us as parents are perfect. We want to do all these things exactly right, but we're human as well. And so sometimes we make a mistake. So the theme of this conference is Confessions of an Imperfect Mother. So do you have a story about a time you maybe thought you were doing the right thing, but you messed up, but then everything turned out okay?
I'll just be totally transparent, even with my divorce. I'm very newly divorced as a Christian woman that has brought a lot of shame, guilt, all these things. And I think I had started believing lies. I had started believing this is what you're supposed to do. This is what a good Christian wife does. This is what happens. And everything I thought I was protecting my kids from, they felt. Right? Our kids and this is what's amazing, even from the youngest age, it's amazing what they hear. Even if you're whispering, I mean, right? We could be whispering something in the front seat and they'll hear it in the back seat. And so all these things I thought I was doing to protect my kids, I was actually stifling, who they wanted to be, how they wanted to express themselves. I was, really pushing down a sense of safety because there was something palpably not right in our home, but I wasn't addressing it because I thought I was protecting them. And this is something I've learned the hard way, is that you have to find that delicate balance between letting your kids in on things in an age-appropriate way, right? Without overwhelming their stage of life. And so that's where I've gone back and apologized to them and said, I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you more. I'm sorry I didn't give you more of a glimpse as to what I was feeling, because then again, that's going to affect their own marriage relationships one day, right? That's going to affect how open they are with their communication. If they don't see me being open, or at least willing to sit and listen, because again, even in just, if it was like an argument with my former husband and her, she would come to me and tell me something and we'd have a really good conversation. But then when we were in a group, I would not speak up on her behalf because I was afraid. And that really hurt her. The fact that she was like, I went to mom and I told her this, and now she's not advocating for me or with me or giving me a chance to even be heard when we're in a larger family setting. Those things where I think I'm trying to do the right thing by everyone, I was actually doing the opposite. And so I think it's good for our kids to, again, age appropriate. It's much different as, 3, 5, 7-year-old versus 14, 16, 18-year-old. But it's important for our kids to know that we're not perfect, to make mistakes. I also think it's important not to say I'm sorry all the time. I'm kind of a recovering apologist. Sometimes I'll just say I'm sorry. I'll just take the blame and let's smooth it over. No, if you don't, I've learned to say, if I say I'm sorry, well, what for? Oh, I was just trying to be kind. No, even with my kids, I'm sorry. No, I want you to apologize. I apologize for what? Your words have to be sincere, and our kids need to know that there is a weight to our words. And it's so, oh my gosh, I don't know what age your kids are, forgive me, but I just think teenagers especially have this burden upon them, even with social media now, of just, they're always hearing and seeing the negative of what they should do, what they should wear, of what, and I mean, even in private Christian school, it's just amazing what happens in any pocket of our culture because we're all human. And so for them to know that they have a voice, their voice is valuable, their voice is powerful, and it needs to be heard. You have to keep speaking that over your child. And I'm a firm believer, if you hear them speak negatively of themselves, capture that. Just say nope, not on my watch, not in my house, not like, it's not like the Geico commercial, like the no fussing, no cussing. Like we don't need a sign on our walls. Just, you have to be vigilant. And that's where I think asking for help, especially if you're a single mom, we're all working moms, right? All moms work, whether it's inside the house or outside, but being willing to have someone that can reflect back to you, because sometimes we just get tired and we don't hear it anymore, or we just get weary and don't say like, oh, I just would rather have them go to their rooms and play video games or go out with a friend than deal with it. And I think, one thing that I've realized in all of this is that you need to put people in your children's lives before they need them. And what I mean by that is that there's going to come a time where your kids will not listen to you or want to listen to you. And if you wait until that time to try to bring in a mentor or try to bring in a big sister type or a fishing buddy for your son, it's too late. Find people, whether it's an aunt, whether it's a best friend of yours that acts like an aunt, whether it's a small group, find people that can speak into their lives, especially in ways that you can't. If I don't like hunting or fishing or, outdoors camping, I have someone that does that with my son, because I don't want him to not do something just because I don't like to do it. But then that gives him a relationship so that when he needs that, and it's something I can't give to him, that relationship is already there and trusted, as opposed to waiting until you're in the middle of a crisis and scrambling to try to find someone that can legitimately speak into your child's life.
Oh, such good stuff. Sami, I want to ask you this for the final question. What would be your number one takeaway for our moms today?
Yeah, I mean, if not what I just said about finding, like I said, that's been my big epiphany in all of this, especially in the midst of what we're going through right now, is to not be afraid to ask for help and to surround your kids with really good people. I think specifically when it comes to raising uncommon kids, raising more compassionate kids, is to first learn what that means for yourself. We can't give away what we don't have. You literally can't give something you don't possess. And so I could talk about being generous and humble and gracious all day long, but if we don't demonstrate that toward ourselves, there's no way we can exhibit that for our kids, and there's no way we can expect them to then go and do it. So I would just say, as a recovering workaholic, productivity addict, although I'm preaching to myself in this, just have a little grace, mama. Like just go easy, but that doesn't mean sit by and be idle. I think for some of you need to hear slow down and rest. And some of you need to hear pick back up whatever you laid down that you thought is long gone and just drive at it with all your heart. And it is amazing when your kids see you happy and fulfilled and living in your gifting and your skill set. It is amazing how that inspires them, just that ripple effect. And so I think it is that don't worry about doing as much or saying as much, but just try to really live out what it is. I'm just going to say, I bet whoever is listening right now has already had something come to mind. I'm going to just speak it, that I know that there's something you're thinking of, like, I wish I was doing that more, or I wish I didn't stop talking to that person, or whatever that is that's burning inside of you, do it. And if you are having a hard time figuring out what that is, ask your kids like, what do you think? What do you see mommy happy when I do? Or ask a friend. Like I did that. One of the best gifts I ever gave myself was putting on Facebook on my birthday. Like, what do you see in me? And it was a very vulnerable, scary thing because people could have been mean or they could have been silent. And I got some of the best, sweetest things. And it wasn't, and I think people knew my heart enough to know I'm not searching for compliments, but like, what do I do well? What value do I add to your life? You can put it that way, like what value do I add to your life? Because I do a weekday, kind of a daily dash. And so I said, why do you listen to me? why do you come back? And just to see that is really encouraging. So that would be my big takeaway. Go easy on yourself, ask for help, and just reignite that fire inside of you.
I love that. Such good stuff. Sami Cohn is a blogger, host of Sami Cohn Show, and author of the book, Raising Uncommon Kids. Sami, thank you so much for taking the time with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hello, my name is Rich Christensen, and through the years of entrepreneurship and growing crazy businesses, I lost a view of what was really important. Through a series of really tender experiences, my mentor taught me you can replace anything in this world, but you cannot replace your family. So I made a dramatic pivot and started embedding deeply in my family some of the same principles that applied to business. My wife and I began very deliberately parenting. We looked for models, how not to mess our children up. There were really no good models to teach values, to entrench family unity, and to make sure that the values passed on in legacy to my children, and more importantly, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So like every great entrepreneur, I secretly created my own models. I was very hesitant to talk about it, but a few of my closest friends saw the impact that this was having on my children. I decided to take the processes that I used and create an online course so others could also work with their families to create tighter bonds, build confidence and self-esteem, while constructing a gorgeous legacy that they could live on past our lifetime. With this 5-part digital training series, you'll find the single most important lessons of thought leadership that I've ever created. There's 5 critical parts to this series, each with its very unique function. The first is symbols, creating unifying symbols that we all can touch to. Second is the doctrine, the guiding principles that we can tag and understand what the rules are. The third is the traditions or the rituals, where we actually formalize and we unite and show that we're unified with the values. The fourth, my favorite, the defining life events. The final section of this is the structure. What do the really wealthy families do to preserve their wealth and to pass on in the form of family banking? To pass on how you appropriately set up the will and how you embed your family constitution so that these values permeate and pass on. I can tell you firsthand that taking these steps to create a beautiful life for my family is the most important work that I've ever done and also the most rewarding. I would invite you to learn some of these principles, unify your family, bond them, and take some of the guesswork out of this. And I'm going to provide you the framework to make that happen with this 30 years of life experiences. So join me, get your membership to build family legacies today.